Sure. All right, let's begin with the roll call.
All right. Mr. Gary Libby,
Here.
Mr. Robert Ellis,
Here.
Mr. Tony Servance. Mr. Servance was going to be via Zoom. Ms. Edie Kyle. Here. Ms. Helen Humphreys. Here. Mr. Raymond Rousseau.
Here.
Mr. William Bitter.
Here.
Okay, we'll need to have the board vote to allow Mr. Servance to attend by Zoom.
Also move.
I'll second that.
Is he here?
Thank you.
Yeah, Zoom.
Oh,
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't hear him.
No, I didn't either.
So we vote.
Everyone in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none opposed. Hi, Tony.
Hi.
All right, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we'll begin with an approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any objections to the minutes from last?
I'll move approval.
Who seconded? Was that? Okay. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
I'd
those
like-
opposed?
And I'd like to congratulate the staff on a terrific set of minutes. Tough
that was
minutes.
very
You
good.
did a beautiful job.
Yeah, that was
I was
quite
gonna say the
comprehensive.
same. I was going to say the same. Thank you very much for all the details.
All right, we have an approval of that. We were going to have a presentation by the city manager, but he has a conflict because they're having a workshop with city commission. Am I correct? So hopefully we'll see him the next meeting, hopefully. So without that, we'll move to the staff report from the police. We have Lieutenant Garnett.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
I don't have a lot of stats because we switched to a new crime system, so we don't have that information like we used to. But the Beachside's doing really well. We did get quite a few burglaries to some cars way down the 2300 block of South Peninsula, but I believe those kids got caught for the car breaks, so we're doing pretty good. Yes, ma'am.
How do you pronounce your name correctly?
Gernert.
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 Yes.
Gernert. Okay. I'm always messing that up. And
It's
I want
okay.
to say hi, and then I think I don't know how to say her name.
It's okay. It's better than my maiden.
Yeah, I got one of those.
That was
too.
hard.
Here's my question is about the difference between calls for service that might trigger a fine as far as nuisance properties versus what classifies something as like under the state nuisance abatement law.
That's a good question for code enforcement.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yes,
okay, not for
'cause-
you. All right.
No, I mean, officers, they find nuisance properties. I think code enforcement does a run of certain properties if it comes to their attention to see how many times law enforcement's been to that property for an issue, whether it's, junk vehicles or, like an absentee landlord. There's many reasons why it would trigger law enforcement's response. But I think they run that report to determine who's considered a nuisance property for the city to go after.
Okay, so he would be the one to ask, like, the difference between calls for service or how many make it a nuisance property versus going to the nuisance abatement board.
Right, that would be a code
Okay,
question.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay, that's okay.
I have one question. I guess the reports in the future will have the same information that you've given us in the past, but just differently formatted?
It'll be probably a similar format, but because the FBI changed reporting
Right.
for crimes to
Right.
the government, so the system we moved to has a new way to do all of that. So if, let's say we have a robbery, it triggers multiple crimes that are involved with
Yeah.
the definition of a robbery. So it's like a theft, there's violence, so it'll trigger all these other criminal acts that occur at the same time. So when the first sets of numbers come in, it'll be astronomical. Kind of like when Chitwood brought in
Right.
ComStat,
Right.
those numbers went like quadrupled. It'll be the same thing in the beginning until we get that information in a better way. So it'll still be the same, part one crimes will still be reported. It's just written up a little different.
I hope that the PR department shares that with the public.
I think they will.
Because it will look like, I mean, people from adjoining cities will look at it and think,
Yeah.
with the recently bad press we've had on Seabreeze, it'll look like we're, Dodge City.
Absolutely. And just as, now that you brought up Seabreeze, we're working on something for that area. The chief's put me in charge of handling a few things with the area. For 4 weekends in a row, we've hired 6 officers and a sergeant to be primarily Oak Ridge to Glenview, A1A to Peninsula, to address all the crime that occurs in that general area and be very present. So during those 4 shifts, we've written 60+ tickets, made a felony arrest for narcotics, got some meth off the street, got some pills off the street. They've done a really good job in the few hours that they've been given to go do that. And it's set up through the end of September, and in October, their chief is interested. He's wanting to put together a crime suppression team where Seabreeze is partially their focus.
Yeah.
So, because it's gotten a little violent, I will call it. So, yeah. So,
And of course, the violence tends not to be 7 to 2. It tends to be from 2 o'clock on when being open is a privilege, not a right.
from midnight to 2 is the privilege, yes.
Yeah.
That's where the after-hours permit comes into play.
Correct.
You kind of can't control what people intend to do when they come outside and, go attend bars. You would like to think they just go there, dance, and then go home, but that's not what's happening. So,
Is it, do you think it's that, I don't know why, is it that the parking's so spread out? Years ago, I used to really enjoy going to Seabreeze. The problem is that most of the bars really don't have their own parking. They're all going spread out. And so what happens is it just spreads out all over town, and it's very hard and very expensive for our police department to do that. So we got to take, I applaud the department, but it's very, very expensive on the city at the same time.
yeah, the parking situation, they've taken away some parking off of Oak Ridge, but, if there wasn't so much parking on Seabreeze, I don't
Right.
know if it would necessarily control anything other than people getting hit by a car because they're standing in the road trying to get in their cars and stuff. There's plenty of parking lots everywhere for people to park in. It's just the violence isn't all just specifically in a parking lot. It can be anywhere in that general area between
Because they're
Glenview.
walking, yeah.
They can do it anywhere, honestly, so.
Just people hanging out.
It's
Yeah.
hanging out, and that's kind of the target of what these officers at night are doing, is they're targeting anybody who's, congregating in a group, hanging out in their cars, and they're drinking, doing narcotics where they shouldn't be in the parking lot doing that. Park, go to the club, come back and go home.
Right.
That's all. So,
So to Gary's point, wouldn't all the cities around be doing the same thing because it was the FBI that asked us to do it? So
the change in
yeah.
the crime, yes, it's
Yeah.
it's national.
Right, so
yes.
Port Orange and everybody's going to be experiencing the same
Correct.
crazy numbers.
Correct, so,
It's not just going to be us.
Sheriff Chitwood purchased the programming that we're utilizing. It's just working through that program to get the numbers back where we had before, so.
And I guarantee you, there will be some cities that will edit that dramatically
Probably.
because they're even more sensitive than we are to misinterpreting what appears to be crime out of control.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So, anybody have any other questions?
You need an editor?
That's above me. Yes, sir.
It doesn't really pertain to that, but on Beachside where I am, there's businesses that have closed, and I've noticed that, I've been taking care of it with code enforcement. It's helped me quite a bit, and the police department. What happens is they're just hanging out there doing the drugs, sleeping there, then going off and doing whatever they can do. You see a whole lot of stolen goods there. So I've been working on that next to me, calling where it's happened to a neighbor of mine that has his place vacated. Is there anything that we could do? Is there standing up, like some kind of SOP or standard operating procedure that we could do or get together with our neighbors and let them know how to call, how to report things? Because I've noticed that people will come to me and they'll complain about something, but they don't know.
They don't want to bother us with something they
I
think.
had one neighbor, I said, just give
Yeah.
Ken an email.
They have, I mean,
No.
like, we need the call to
Okay.
trigger the police response. There are times when it may hold just because of priority calls take precedence, of course. But, you know, we can't be everywhere at every minute of the day. So if we don't know there's a problem, we can't address it all the time. So they just need to call in and let us know they are having an issue. Having cameras is a really great way to help us solve problems. I know not everybody can afford them, but it's better than nothing. Like a Ring camera or anything similar in product, like a Ring camera helps out.
Isn't there a program with the Daytona PD? Because I remember we went to that,
Yes.
okay.
You guys, what we would do is request permission from the Ring camera owner to access the camera for a specific date and time to look for.
Is that still going on with the PD so
I
I
believe
could send
so, yeah.
people there?
I believe so.
Do you know who I send them to?
I believe Sergeant Aaron Coffer is his
Okay.
name. Yeah,
Okay.
he was in charge of it, but if he doesn't do it anymore, he'll point you in the right direction.
Thank you, thank you.
Anybody have anything? All right, y'all have a good night.
Thank you so much. All right. Do we have a staff report from code enforcement now, I believe?
Good evening.
Hello.
I'm Mark Jones. I'm the field supervisor with the Code Enforcement Department. I wanted to give you a little update about what we're doing in the Code Department at the moment, and then any questions you may have. Like the police, the whole city of Daytona has gone to a new tracking system. We used to have a system called Track It. We now have a system called IMS. That is still getting the bugs worked out of. So at times you're going to have challenges with getting the information. We're having challenges putting the information in. But the company is working with us diligently we're going through what we call phase 2 of our communications with them, coming up with all the forms or that we don't have, or where the system would jump to a certain form. They're still working on some of those bugs out. We're also working in our lobby over at 125 South Palmetto to install a kiosk so that the public can come in. They're able to apply for rental licenses. They're able to pay a lien or they're able to pay for the license. They'll also be able to get into IMS and check for the status of code violations or issue a code violation. We're also, the rental department is just, again, getting affected by this, so they're working on getting the new rental app renewal, the rental renewals back out. So again, working with IMS, trying to get the bugs worked out so that they can, because a lot of the information was imported from Track It into IMS, and some of it made it correctly, some they've had to go back, and we are still able at this time to view Track It, so we're able to go back in and pull some information if it didn't make the move. We are also planning on having an open house in code compliance on August 23rd. Now that's tentative, but that's what we're planning. That will be for all the public, come in, see our offices, meet the staff. We can show you processes that we go through, and also just to get to know us a little bit better. The following day, our offices are going to be closed because we're going to be having a staff meeting, but you'll still be able to file complaints, of course, via the IMS system or by phone. So, I mean, the inspectors will still be checking their messages and this type of stuff. You can, any of you who used to be able to get into Track It, you can now still do that by going into the city's webpage and clicking on a large button that says IMS. For first-time users, you do have to register, but after that, you can go in and check for all kinds of complaints or file complaints. So that makes it a little easier for you. It's just going to be a new system, so it may be a little different to some of you who may have used the system before. And as a reminder to everyone, due to the state statute now changed as of last July, a year ago July, all complaints have to be, come in with the name of the person, the address. No anonymous complaints. We're not allowed to take anonymous complaints. So that's just a real quick overview of what we're doing in compliance, code compliance. So if you have any questions,
Yeah, I've got.
and if you don't, that's okay. I mean, but I would assume you do.
I think we do. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I have one question because I had somebody asking me for help. They're renting, there's an apartment building on Grandview, South Grandview area. It has multiple people renting there. And it's like infested with rats and has all these different, code violations. When they said that they had these complaints, of course, I gave them code.
Sure.
I don't know what other steps I could go with them. I told them that they should contact the city, being the code enforcement, and contact the health department. I didn't know who else I should get them to contact at that point.
Well, if it's more than 4 units, they are regulated by the state. So we in code enforcement can't regulate the apartment complex. We can handle a complaint. If you've got somebody from unit 101 who's complaining of
It's a lot of rats.
rats, the inspector will come out for a unit. They cannot come out, we don't inspect the whole premise like we would typically do with a regular rental up to 4 units. Now, when the inspector is there, he or she is supposed to look at the grounds, do a full look of the building, because that's a code violation. But we don't do anything with the rental portion of it. That's all state controlled. Notifying the health department is a very good recommendation.
That's the only thing I knew to recommend. I did the 2 recommendations. So I know code enforcement came out and did an inspection for her. And I
Okay.
think it's going to end well for her, thank
Good.
goodness. But, well, I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question for you. We had a discussion recently about parking, especially in the Main Street area, especially during festivals. And a lot of people that just put a sign out there that says $20.
Yeah.
And how do we go about enforcing? You don't even know who the owner is, so how do you file a complaint?
Well, we know who the property owner is, and it's the property owner's responsibility, no matter who is out there selling those parking spaces. If code is notified, they will write up the property owner. We have the property over on 709 East ISB that's going to a hearing, upcoming special magistrate hearing, for the same issue of putting a sign out, $20 parking, and they're using the vacant property up there near the corner to do parking either over a holiday or special events without a special events permit.
Now, how is your staff basically staffed up to take care of it during these events? Do they actually drive along with their truck and see?
Yes, during the major events, the Bike Week, Biketoberfest, the whole code department works through every night up to 2 o'clock in the morning, just going through that. We, usually when the event starts, we go around to the vendors, to some people who are, attempting to park, and we check to make sure they have a special permit for that event. If not, we close them down until they get the permit from the building department.
And have you seen an increase over the years or a decrease?
Well, we've seen a decrease over individuals using their front yard to charge parking.
Absolutely.
We have seen a decrease in that. Some of the larger lots, we are still working with the property owners. Some of them have had to go to court, go to a hearing, special magistrate hearing, and to either stop or receive fines.
And your staff is qualified to see it themselves, find out who the property owner is, and get
Yes, they're very,
get in touch with them.
yeah, they're very, well, we can't always get in touch with the property owner, but we sure have their mailing address of the owner, whichever is on file with the Volusia County property appraisers. That's where the violation will go. We also, when we have these type of instances, Per statute, we have to send a certified letter. But we can also go and post the property, which starts the clock that day.
Right.
Instead of waiting for the certified mail to be returned, undeliverable, we do, in those cases, we post the property. We do that a lot with our vacant lot.
That was a great segue to my next question.
We have one individual who that is his sole responsibility throughout the city is to do vacant lots. The majority of the time when he goes out, of course, this is a tough season when it's growing as rapidly as it is, he posts the property and sends out the certified letter. He gives them 10 days to get it corrected. If not, they come before the special magistrate. System there is the special magistrate on the first hearing would find them in noncompliance. And the second hearing, if it hasn't, which is a month later, if it hasn't been corrected, we, the staff, request a fine. And typically those fines are $250 a day with a cap of $15,000 to go against the property.
And are you staffed appropriately with the increase? That's,
Yes, I believe we are. We, as I said, we have a code staff of 10 individuals.
okay.
We have the city broke down, we have one individual doing just vacant lots. We have 2 individuals who are doing businesses, commercial properties, and the rest of them are broke down, like we have 2 working beachside, and then we have them in different zones. Again, if you go onto the city's webpage, there is a map that even shows where the other code inspectors are, the ones who have territories, and who their name is.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
That's your first.
Just a tiny question. I own a parking lot on Main Street, which abuts my business. And I pay, of course, taxes every year, but during the event, I have to go and pay for a special license to park. My customers can, yeah, I have the Christian motorcyclists who run my parking lot, and the money they get, they use for good stuff. But down from me, east-wise, there's an empty property, there's a building that's empty, and they park there during the event, and I asked them how they managed to do that. They said they paid for a year-round parking
Correct,
on empty property,
correct.
and yet,
Which property is it?
oh, sorry.
Probably, are you talking about 216 at the corner of
We've been through this.
Peninsula and Main? 216.
That vacant lot?
Yeah, well, it's a little building surrounded by.
Right. Now, as to special use permits, that's handled through the building department.
Right.
There's nothing, I have no control over those, even when they get approvals through special use permits to park on some of those vacant properties, like the one on the corner there at Peninsula and Main Street. That is all handled through building department and through development as to what is approved use for the special events.
It just seems weird that if you own the property and you pay taxes on it, and to use it, you have to pay permit.
I understand.
Because of the chamber.
Okay.
The chamber takes over the property.
Is it my turn yet?
Go ahead. Your turn.
No, I didn't mean after you, I meant like before he goes again.
No,
Go ahead,
you go
Amy.
You go first.
On the same topic, I agree with you on what you're saying. Are you saying that on that lot, they can do pay parking year-round? Or,
Yes. Yes.
you mean, okay, all right. See, that's a
Absolutely.
surprise to me. So so there are requirements to have a pay parking lot for signage. We know, like, there has to be
Correct.
4 feet off the ground, it has to have the BTR number on it, it has, right?
Correct,
All
yes,
that-
it must has a BT,
Right.
not the
So
BTR, but the
that lot
BT license.
does not have that.
Yeah, and that is, you
So-
cannot have a paid parking lot in the city without having a permit. to have
Right,
the paid
so
parking.
if they don't have a sign on it, that's a code violation, correct?
If they're using it for paid parking, yes.
Okay, so you
Unless
probably
it's-
want to call them when they have their sign out for pay parking, call someone to come. and
Yes,
take
call
a look.
code, it's very easy.
Let me
And that's
add
where you
one,
get 'em on the
one
site.
caveat here. Have you ever heard of the master plan that's provided by the chamber who takes over a lot of the
Yes.
Main
Yes,
Street
we
area.
use that in code
Okay.
exclusively when it's an
Well, the
event.
master plan, colleague, is why they get to get a special
No,
permit. and-
no, that's not correct. No, it's
That's what
not.
they've been
I'm on the
doing.
master plan task force, okay? She's talking about year-round.
I understand
Master
that.
plan is only for the event.
No, we understand.
Oh, okay.
And we understand that.
So that's not what she's saying.
Some of the challenges we've had are the city commission delegates a lot of authority to the chamber who runs the special events on Main Street. Now,
That's not her point.
you will see, Amy, from time to time, unusual things popping up that go contrary to common sense, that are the end result of a negotiation between partners like the chamber, which is a significant group in town, and their needs during only part of the year. But
But I sit on the task force that approves that plan, to
well,
recommend it to the city.
I hate to tell you
So-
that gives you membership on the task force, really no police powers, but
No,
there are things that slip between the lip and the cup here, and I think our colleague is sharing one with us. Now, you were told at our last meeting, I believe, that you could take out a yearly permit, should you care to, and then you would not have to pay
Yeah, I
during
had not
special
known that
events.
was possible, but yes, I will do that.
Yes,
Yeah, well, I mean,
please.
this is sort of a moot point. We went through this at our last meeting rather rigorously, so she is eligible to take out a year-long permit. She owns the parking lot. She uses it for customers who come to her
Yes,
business.
again, that's, you would go to the building department.
Correct.
And get a
right.
permit.
But then you would also need a sign that is 4 feet off the ground and has the BT number, and you know, if I may, one of my comments was gonna be, I actually found one parking lot now that has a compliant sign. I think I mentioned this last time. We talked about the sign requirements at this meeting, and the Salty Dog Surf Shop on A1A now suddenly has a sign. It's firmly fixed, 4 feet off the ground. It has the big numbers. I don't see their BT number on there, which that's supposed to be there. But it's the best sign that I've seen. So it's kind of like, we have one, it's a victory, right? But that's what we want to see on those lots, if they are illegal year-round parking. And I would also say, I kind of want to look that up, because it's all grass. And I don't think you can have a BT for pay parking on a year-round license for parking on grass. Am I?
You are correct.
don't
think-
As
I am
far,
correct. I think
I mean,
you're right.
anything can be issued.
Yeah.
Let me
Right,
step
they
back.
can always vary.
But you can't park on undeveloped
Right.
property.
And that's what
Except
she's
when they
talking-
have the master plan and they allow these things.
Right.
But undeveloped property or an unpaved lot with grass and dirt, you are not, per code, allowed to use that for parking.
So I'm going to do a little research. I'm going to do a little research before we come back. But one other little thing. So we talked about, Mr. Masson brought up the parking violations and all that we had talked about, the pay parking. But, I want to ask you like a procedural issue. So I know like in neighborhoods, when people park on their front lawns, a code officer might be driving by. If they saw that, would they cite that, or would they kind of wait to see if it moved? Or
Their responsibility is to cite that,
to cite it, okay,
because you're not allowed to park on front yard.
on a front yard, that's on a residential.
Now, what they may do is stop, talk to the property owner.
Right.
Tell them, hey, you can't park there. I mean, we're not out to make everybody's life miserable. We're just trying to enforce the code.
Right, and you don't need more paperwork, so if you can walk
Well,
up
and
and
it
tell
has
the
nothing to do
guy.
with the paperwork. We just want compliance.
Right.
And if by stopping and knocking on the door and saying, hey, I understand you have a short driveway and you have a daughter that has a car and wants to park on the grass, well, you can't. And we do that often,
Yes.
especially for that type of violation.
Okay, so then what if if you're driving around just like that and you pass a vacant property, similar, it's just grass like that, like what Ms. Humphries is describing, would you cite immediately that lot, or does
Yes.
someone have to report it?
No, we would cite that, and our vacant lot inspector cites numerous properties where has a house and they're using the neighbor's parcel that's undeveloped to park his boat.
Correct.
Park his cars, that is a vacant lot.
It's a verboten.
That
Okay.
would have a code case on it.
Would that stand for commercial vacant grass
No,
lots?
it's in a residential area.
Okay,
They put for commercial, the same thing. You aren't allowed to park on an unimproved
unimproved
surface
surface.
unless they've gotten an exception from the city.
Because the case that you brought up that's going to the magistrate it was active like this for, frequently before it was reported to code. And I just wondered how so many people drove right by, I
We
just.
probably
do you-
opened on that specific parcel 15 to 20 different cases.
Yeah.
We just were none of them made it to the special magistrate as they are this month.
Right, so they get compliance
Bravo.
somehow and they fall off the books, right?
Well,
They go and there's no
Yes.
cars and they fall off the books, yeah,
Um,
okay.
again, we bring some of these presentations to the city, and sometimes they've asked us, well, we'll make sure they do it correctly the next time.
All right.
Not that, and because the problem is a lot of those violations, if we cite someone and we give them 5 days to get it corrected, well, the event's over.
Yes,
That type of thing. So we try to get into posting these properties with a 24-hour notice. But again, I don't
Right.
have any ability to tow the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
All I can do for my people is to write a code violation on it.
Yeah.
so the last question, I promise. If you, not during an event, you describe during events, you're there till 2 a.m., but not during events, like regular weeks, like tonight, for example, are there any code officers after hours or on weekends? Like if someone was doing parking like this for
We
people?
have one code officer who works a regular 10-hour day on Saturday.
Okay,
We also, I know Seabreeze came up a little earlier. This weekend, I have 2 code inspectors working with our police liaison, Sergeant Flowers, and they're going to be working Friday night and Saturday night till 3 a.m. With us working with a police officer,
Bless their heart.
we're able to get into some of these
have
places
a
that aren't
very
open
short
during normal
question.
business hours.
Sure.
And we're also able to check, we also would be checking to make sure that if they do they have an active after-hours permit? Or do they have an active outside sound permit? Those are a couple that but we also find things like graffiti, where we go inside and there's floor tile missing, this type of thing, that we would write up as typical code violations.
I commend you because someone ran into my store during Bike Week and said, I need your permit, I need it quick. I went, what do you mean you need my permit? They had set up a food truck on an empty property near my place. And I just thought,
Was it next to, was it 504 Main Street?
yeah.
Yeah.
just
That was
set
a
up-
vacant property, vacant building, and they were not allowed because it was a vacant building and they did not get a permit.
Because it's not fair to those who are paying taxes, you're right.
Correct, yeah, that was, they were closed down.
I mean, ran in and wanted my permit. Anyway, your
And the
folks
permit would have had
never
been for
got it.
that parcel as it was.
Right.
Parcels attached
Wouldn't have
to
worked.
that building where it was, used to be a hemp shop.
Yes, yes.
so then I have to follow up with my question to Lieutenant Gernert about the nuisance, the difference between calls for service that make it a nuisance property versus what makes it go to nuisance abatement, the nuisance abatement board.
We do not handle nuisance abatement.
Correct.
Okay,
We in code enforcement.
Right.
What we do is we write up violations, we take them to the code board or the special magistrate, and that's our only avenue.
Method, okay.
We do not, if we have a nuisance property that people are continually calling on, of course, we will want to get that to the code board or the special magistrate as quickly as possible.
okay,
But if it's, 20 police calls because they believe there's too many cars parked out front in the middle of the night, that doesn't fall under code.
okay.
On the sidewalk, over driveways, that
Yeah,
sort
no,
of
and
thing.
the problem with some of that is we don't see it a lot at night.
Yeah.
But that is something, we do not, again, in code, we don't enforce like parking in the street easement.
Right.
So who does handle nuisance abatement? I know there's a board, but how does a place get referred to nuisance abatement?
I do not have that answer.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
Do some homework.
Oh, thanks, Gary, I will.
Any other questions for code enforcement?
Yeah, I have one. Mr. Jones, you know, you're aware of the National Register districts in the city. And you're aware that some of them have design standards that trump code on the colors they can paint their house, the kinds of windows that can be used for replacement and all that. When the Seabreeze University residential area, about 1925, applied to the city for a local designation, city suggested that the historic districts really need to look to the national standards first. And so we walked 68% of the people who own property in that district agreed to move forward, and we became a National Register district. When we applied for city designation, the city just forced the district to apply for and abide by design standards, which limited the colors of paint that someone could paint their house with, the kinds of additions that could be added on historic house, et cetera, et cetera. And for probably 10 years, everything went along swimmingly. I have heard from 2 or 3 residents within that area that code is no longer enforcing the design standards, which are still on the books, as to color. There is a fire engine red, how a guy painted his house fire engine red. There is now a electric blue, psychedelic blue that shines at night in the neighborhood. And I'm wondering, the word on the street was the city is looking in the other way. They're just ignoring it. They're not going to make anybody repaint their house because they painted it the wrong color. And that's a hell of a thing to hear. Sitting on this board and having been on other boards that are fighting for some sort of standards to upgrade neighborhoods. And what is the code board's position on, let's use Seabreeze University, we could use Ocean Dunes as another example, that have design standards on the books that the Historic Preservation Board has to refer to in order to make judgments on certificates of appropriateness or even the ability to apply for a permit kind of thing. Are you enforcing Main Street on the books? Still, every separate building on Main Street, even if it's owned by the same person, should be painted a different color. I don't know if you knew that or not, but those are the design standards that were introduced to property owners on Main Street. Mrs. Dodd and I used to have debates about it on a regular basis. And I notice now that while we have fewer buildings on Main Street, more of them are painted the same color. My problem is, where do we draw the line if we're going to throw the design standards out and let someone paint their house fire engine red, when the design standards obviously show 25 other shades that are not fire engine red? What would your position be if I called you and said there's a non-complying house here that's painted fire engine red, the painter is still there doing the trim? Would you cite that? How do we?
I would have to look to some other departments because we do not set design standards in the code department.
But you live by them.
Well, they have their ability to cite these individuals also.
Well, historic preservation can't. They don't do that. They look to code. And that's the problem. I think this is one of those hot potatoes that nobody is really very interested in accepting. And so we've got a bleed going on in the historic neighborhoods where people are deciding to tear down coquina walls that are 100 years old because they don't like the wall anymore to repair it. That is, you know.
Now, that is an easy code violation if they didn't get a permit to remove that wall. That is a code violation. I will get back or have someone regards to the
Paint.
colors of the ability of what residents and/or commercial buildings can be painted. We, in code, would enforce if it needed painted, we would enforce
Right.
if it had peeling painted, rotted
Right.
wood. We have not, at least since I've been with the city, enforced the color of a building.
So you could paint it black if you wanted to?
My understanding, if you're in those districts, they've got to get a prior approval before they do it.
Well, what if they don't get who do they get a prior approval from? That's the question.
Again, that's something I would have to get back with you on. Maybe someone else here with better knowledge on how that procedure works. That is not one that I have been dealing with.
Okay. I think it might be an area that's falling between, 2 or 3 different departments. And I certainly think, and I think the new management in the city is very interested in valuing up our historic neighborhoods, not letting them deteriorate again. We fought for 40 years in order to bring them back up now. They're some of the most valuable property on the tax rolls in the city. And now we're fighting the same fight 35, 38 years later. So I'd appreciate it maybe from the code perspective. I know many of the advisory board members on your board, and they wonder too why code does not weigh into something like,
As I said, we don't weigh in, or at least since I've been there, on the color. You talk
Okay.
about facade, you talk about any of those changes, those are things that would require building permits that we would then enforce. But I will look into it and see what direction we can get.
do you know if other cities force a permit to paint a house?
I do not know of any city that enforces permits to paint a house.
DeLand, it's an adjacent one,
But
the
no, I'm
big-
just stating that for the Florida Building Code, I don't know of any code that says that a permit is required. Now, it may be handled through the Land Development Code or the
Yeah.
City of Ordinances, but not through the permitting department. So-
Just a question.
Yeah,
Just
no,
a
but
question.
I'll look into it.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Any other
Any other
questions?
questions?
I just wanted to circle back, sorry, I don't want to belabor this issue, but I want to circle back to the parking signs, the 4-foot high requirements. Is there something either code enforcement could do or some other agency to go where these problem lots are and find out who the owner is and start getting the signs up there? If we only have one sign, that's really not doing much. So how do we proceed as a committee? I don't know who to advise except you.
Well, there is an ordinance.
Short list of
Yeah,
PTs.
yeah, that we can look into. For them to get that sign, they have to get a permit for that sign.
Right.
Oh, is that right? I
Yes.
thought
they have-
In the ordinance, I thought it said no property owner is required to get a permit for that sign.
Let me review that ordinance.
Okay.
That's all, and if it's something, it would be something that code would enforce. But I just need to review the ordinance.
And could we invite you back in the future? Like after, like Toba Week and actually get some
I'll talk to my
stats?
manager who was not available tonight. Yeah. But no, I enjoy answering your questions and taking down any things that we need to follow up on.
Thank you, it was very informative.
Just 5 sec, I don't want to take up too much time because I know I feel like I'm taking up a lot of time. But the one thing that I've noticed is of recent, I hate being the busybody. I've seen a lot of things, and I can understand where the colors can be very frustrating, by the way. But the one thing I've noticed that code enforcement has really been on point is up and down to where fences, like I had a property I was leasing the club and had the paint on it was peeling, and it looked like it wasn't maintenance from the people who were leasing it from me. And then, of course, I wasn't happy about getting the letter, but I was happy I got the letter because it helped me keep abreast of what was going on, okay? The one thing I'm very pleased about with code enforcement is it's for redevelopment, they're probably one of the most important things that, for our city.
Here, here.
So I greatly appreciate you and thank you for your service and what
Well,
you're
and we
doing.
really, we're here to help with the city, have it become the city beautiful, to remove blight. I mean, that's our goal.
Really appreciate
So,
you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. And we're on to old business. Do we have any old business?
Well,
No? Yeah, I don't see any under here.
nothing that's on
Yeah.
the posted, but
I mean, we
Madam
can have that in
Attorney,
comments.
because it's not agended, can we discuss old business, specifically a recommendation maybe from this board to the city commission about the conflict between height limit and setbacks in the city that's been recently on the tip of everyone's tongue and on the front burner?
Well, I believe the city commission is already, or at least the planning commission has expressed concerns about the plan development and the broad scope of what these agreements are allowing for, that they're more broad and allow just about anything and not specific enough. So those concerns have already been heard. And I would say the setbacks and all of that is being
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 addressed.
looked
Part of
at
it.
and
great.
making people aware that they need to be a little bit more planned.
Specific.
Well,
Yeah.
I think, again, this is perhaps something that falls between the lip and the cup, when the developer, and I'll use Mr. Merrill, who I know, and the recent case, came to the city, if he does not hear there's a relationship between the setbacks and the height, I can't blame him for designing a 26 or 27-story building on a residential building lot east of A1A. And I think we owe it to develop, if we're going to redevelop our city, I think we owe it to contractors and attorneys and people to have a rule that everyone can abide by, because one of the most serious things is the artificial valuing up of property, because we're waiving all of the safeguards that were in place when PD was developed 28 years ago. I was chairman of economic development at that time, and believe me, they called it the variance rule, that you could go higher if you were willing to increase your setback, and it was a ratio and a mathematical ratio that we lived with. And the Alikis, fabulous condominiums, the highest valued condominiums in our city, are a result of that. Even the Russian Hotel, as you realize, steps back as it goes higher. That was I think, a last stab effort to try and comply with the spirit of what we were trying to do, and that is not build a wall between the ocean and the residents in our city with global warming and all of the problems. I hope that the planning board is also thinking of environmental standards, because the state's going to come down the road with them very soon. So if we're going to look at the relationship between setbacks and height, maybe a board like ours can suggest or urge that the planning board does. It maybe elicit other opinions from other boards who are affected by it. I mean, we were the first board they came to. And I hated to be throw a bucket of cold water on his project, but I wasn't surprised at what happened at the planning board. And I felt sorry for the developer, for the owner of the property, because he went into this wide open. He had no idea that PD couldn't allow him to go as high as he wanted to. No idea at all that there were other considerations that were involved. So I'm glad that you mean the planning board? Is that what you meant by the planning?
That's what I said, the planning board.
Yeah, well,
Well, no, I said planning board. I said also the city commission has expressed concern, and staff is taking that under
it was
consideration.
another name than board. You came up with another, that's okay. I thought it was another a group of people. But yeah, I think probably the consternation we had as a committee, being the first ones to get the bucket of cold water, might suggest that the planning board should know that our vote was rescinded for some obvious reasons. I think one of the reasons
Well,
we
there-
moved forward was we were told it didn't make any difference what we voted on that project.
Well, my understanding is that the developer is probably going to be reconfiguring the project. And they, at the last planning board meeting, that was 2 weeks ago now already, or 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I believe it was, they did another 2-month continuance on the project. So it is definitely under reworking, and if they do substantial changes, there is a possibility that it would come back to this board. It depends on,
What about the next guy? What about the next person who has a residential lot on the ocean and wants to put up a 35-story building? If we don't have guidelines on the front end, we're just looking for this controversy every time we have a developer who wants to take advantage of an opportunity. So I would much rather the city come up with some sort of a guideline for development so that we can sit down with developers and they know the story, and we understand the story, and they know the story. I mean, I was almost embarrassed that we were caught so flat-footed in front of that applicant. And forgive me for expressing my personal opinion, but I did. I felt sort of silly that they didn't know that there was going to be a huge pushback because we had always used the variation rule. You can go higher, but you have to increase your setbacks. If you want to go back through the history of how the PD developed, you'll see that 28 years ago. That was the cornerstone concept that got the vote through to create the PD in Daytona Beach. Okay.
I want to add to that, and thank you for bringing it up. If we are not required to review the revised proposal, what is the point of this committee? That's basically where I stand.
We'll get to go after the landscape plan, don't worry.
Okay.
They'll have to come back on the landscape.
All right, as long as we get involved.
so the purpose of this board, I mean, it's laid out in the Land Development Code, and when there's the, and I was just looking at it, let me find it. In section 3, there's a table of who is responsible for what review of a project. And some things, like the paint for a historic building, that is done at the staff level, where the staff would approve the painting of the building.
Did they approve the fire engine red building? I'd love to know that.
I don't know, sir, I'm not involved in their process.
Could you find out for me?
I would need more information than just a.
Because
fire-
whoever the staff
You
was who
haven't
did it needs to be reprimanded or
Well,
fired.
I was looking at the Seabreeze code, and the only colors not permitted are fluorescent colors. But anyway, so that table provides who is responsible for what review and what point, and whether it's a final decision-making or if it's just a recommendation. The point being, with regard to the Beachside project, the Silver Beach project, is this board has already looked at it. Although the planning board has looked at it, they never took a vote on it. So if there's not significant changes requiring it to come back here, then they'll just go ahead and vote on it. But if there's sufficient changes so that it's really no longer the same project, that it's a different project, then it would come back here. And that's just, again, that was just the zoning amendment. That wasn't even the site plan. And that project would have to come back for the site plan approval. So there is that another quote-unquote bite at the apple of looking at this project.
We'll see it then. And then something nobody has brought up yet is that with that continuance to the October meeting, the planning board requested that, or put in there as a condition that Mr. Merrill hold another neighborhood meeting, duly notified according to the LDC. So he has to do a mail out and do a public meeting for neighbors to come, and we can show up. And then other people that have any, so when he gets his new plan, it'll get to be seen by the public at that meeting, even if it's not enough to bring it back here.
All right.
Might I make a suggestion that we look at the language that the developers use to notify neighborhoods, and you'll see that very few of them show the plot. Very few of them tell you exactly the variances they want, the exceptions they want. They just invite the neighborhood to come because
Right,
they'd
and
like
then
to
they
put
do a
up an apartment building.
presentation of it.
Well, I can't blame neighbors for not going if they don't know why they're going. In other words, I think there should
And
be
it's
some.
very few people get notified. It's only within 300 feet anyway.
Well,
So it's up
within
to-
300 feet of Silver Beach are probably 40 or 50 houses, at least.
I think there was less than 20, about 25 people that got notified to the last meeting, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's very small amount. It takes citizens to be aware of they can sign up on the city website to get notified of these types of meetings. And you can look and you say, well, this one's out by LPGA, I'm not that interested. But this one's close to me, so I should go. But it takes people to get activated. And if they're just sitting in their house and then suddenly the thing goes up, whose fault is that? People need to get out of their house and come to these meetings and get involved and let your opinion be heard. And I think that's what's happening now. And that's why, you felt a little embarrassed. I wasn't embarrassed at all. I was glad that it came up here and that we handled it well. And it was a good public forum for that thing to come out. And developers will start to learn, because in the past, if they've just kind of waltzed in and got their changes they wanted, it doesn't have to continue ad infinitum. I think there's sort of a pullback now, especially with the beach concerns.
Yeah, but
So-
there won't be a pullback if the city doesn't come up
Yeah.
with some guidelines that allow.
Well, they have the
board-
guidelines, they just have to stop granting all the variances all the time.
So the table that I was referring to is in your package.
I wondered about that.
It's like it wasn't looking
Thank
right.
you.
It wasn't looking right.
Right.
So I was,
Wondered when we were going to get to that.
that's a staff thing. They provided
So
it.
efficient, Angela,
Yes.
thank you.
Do we have any public comments? I don't have any requests. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. John is.
Meh.
Can I say one thing super quick before he
You can.
speaks?
Yeah, we
I
still have
found
board-
and I just sent this to Mark Jones, but section 94 of the City Code of Ordinances, 113, exemption from obtaining a sign permit. No owner or operator of a pay parking lot shall be required to obtain a sign permit under section 6 for any sign required to be erected under section 94-112. And 94-112 is where it describes. So they can just go out and put up, as long as it meets those requirements, they don't need to pay for a permit.
I wanted to ask you one question. Is there a particular size of the sign? You
Yes.
said it's 4 foot off the ground. Is it?
Yeah,
It's the size.
it's in, just look in the Code of Ordinances, section 94-112,
Section.
unless you want me to read the whole thing.
An interesting question would be whether or not the chamber charges them to participate in the master plan, because there is a charge.
If they have a pay parking lot, they can do
they-
pay.
That's why there is
a
no
BT.
permit fee. They'll pay, but it won't be to the city. It will-
No, I disagree.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Pay parking lot is a pay parking lot.
All right, we're on to public comments. John Nicholson.
Sorry, John.
Hi, John.
Hello. John Nicholson, 413 North Grandview Avenue. With regard to nuisance abatement, it's a police officer. He's assigned to nuisance abatement. You need 3 violations, either drugs, alcohol, or noise, and then it's brought before the nuisance abatement board. If the officer is not functioning well, you will go 2, 3, 4, 5 years without a a case going before the board. So it's up to the police department. Secondly, Biketoberfest is coming. Do we know what time they're going to close Main Street?
We don't.
12 o'clock? 11 o'clock? They closed it early last year, and they were told they were supposed to. They do have an hour leeway. The hour is 12 o'clock. On 10 occasions, they can delay it an hour to 3 o'clock. The businesses were allowed to be open, but the street was closed at 12 o'clock. They blocked at both ends of the street. That is not kosher, as far as I'm concerned. So it does affect the Main Street CRA, because that's your bread and butter, tourism. Secondly, code, do we still have a code for color in the CRA? I've got a house right down from the water park that is a bright, not fluorescent, but an unusually yellow, okay? And then there's another house somewhere else that's a blue that's just irritating blue. Graffiti. We are now getting more graffiti than Carter's Got Pills. The one on A1A and University, that closed building, they've added to it. Now they've gone around the corner. And there's several others that I've noticed. So push comes to shove, somebody sees it, and they repeat it. It's like monkey, monkey do, monkey does. Senior Frog, are we getting him? Is it coming? I'm assuming that we're getting Senior Frog. It would be good. George's Lot, I've heard that there's a possibility that big vacant lot is coming. Is there any movement? Do we know anything about the property on the boardwalk? Third, the Uruguay property, there's something going in there. Do we know what's going on? They own the other end of Ocean Avenue on the very south end. Teresa's property, I asked, and I don't know if you guys asked, which property she actually sold that belongs to, because it would be nice for you guys to know which ones are possibilities. Because if they own a property, they may or may not develop it, they may sit on it. So you may anticipate that they're going to develop it and it can just sit there. And we've done that. So it's very important to these things to get moving, and sometimes word of mouth helps things a lot. The budget, okay? I got this nice little thing that says Main Street, what you guys are supposed to be doing, and there are a lot of interesting things there that you guys are not doing, looking at this, doing that, etc. I don't know if you all have all gotten one of these.
No.
It's ancient, it's from 2012.
Yes, and you
Still
should
the
look
one
at
we
it.
go by.
You guys.
Are supposed to do stuff?
Yeah. And it's all kinds of stuff that you guys are to look into, and access to recreational and educational activities to
not staff?
promote. No. Okay?
That's the
So-
old land development code. There's a new land development code now that has tightened and eliminated a lot of that.
Right, but this is what you had, and this is what
Yeah.
Midtown is going and asking for. So I'm asking you guys, and I've said it before, go back to what you were originally entitled to in 1985 and see how it's changed. You guys would be surprised what they were doing in 1985 when I got here, Anyway, and the budget, I think you guys should know how much money came in, who's getting it, where it's going, and if you're going to make recommendations, if you have 10 cents, you're not going to recommend $1 million project. If you have 5 or 6 million, 56,000 for fireworks is not a heck of a lot to ask for. So do you understand what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
If you know that you've got an X budget, 2.4 million is right off the bat is an IOU. Okay, you owe that for the loans for the present buildings that are on the ocean. Well, you've got X amount of dollars beyond that. $100,000 goes to 3 maintenance people. Then you've got city staff. You've got to do this. What's left over? And you should look at that. And if the county says, well, we've got $7 million that we can give you from ECHO funds that we were planning on a boardwalk. You guys, if you come up with a project we'll give you the 7 million. And Jim Chisholm said, no, we don't want it. Well, you guys may want another pier. You guys may want something. So if you know that money's out there, think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All
Thank you,
right.
John.
Jenny Nazak.
Good evening, everybody. Jenny Nazak, 501 Harvey. Always good to see you all.
Good to
now,
see you, Jenny.
I know everybody has different ideas about what things are considered attractive, but I started to ride my bicycle past a couple of suddenly brightly colored houses, and I was like, how cute, how festive. Colors, all colors are pretty. I mean, this isn't the hill I want to die on, but to me, it's kind of refreshing. It's like refreshing. If we become this like beige town, it's kind of dull. Like a lot of towns that I've visited that are cool, just have different quirky colors of buildings and stuff, you know? And plus we live at the beach, and I've always thought, well, the beach is kind of festive. Anyway, beach. Yeah, okay. Now another topic, heat. Oh my gosh. I didn't do my burnt toast, you know, but like, weird. This summer, woo! So I'm in my never-ending crusade to create shade and coolness on the beach side. Crusade. Oh my God, it's a crusade. It's a shade crusade. And if anybody has not been to my house, you're welcome to come to the corner. There's benches where anybody can sit under a tree and experientially experience the difference between the shade and the blistering sidewalk, which we all know how hot it is, but sometimes we have to be reminded, like, wow, trees really make things cooler. Also, yes.
I have to ask you, do you remember when on our beach, we had what we called peanut trees?
Right.
They were
Peanut
wooden
trees?
structures that had palm fronds on top of them. They stuck deep into the sand. They had seats where you could just sit.
Oh,
They were wonderful.
this sounds really good.
Because we live in a different world now after the hurricanes, we don't have the wide beach we once had.
Oh,
And I don't know that they would
Huh.
be able to take when the tides
that
come all the way up to
sounds,
the seawall.
that sounds really
They
cool.
were all up and down the beach.
The peanut trees that we use now at the Harvey entrance are the fragments of a concrete staircase that got like, it's like the bench. It's like the bench of Harvey Beach. I'll go sit on the bench. Or like the little edge of a wall thing, like if I have my cup of coffee and I just want to hang out instead of sitting on the sand. But yeah, benches and things. Water, I realize, you know what, I think every park needs a water fountain, no matter what. It's like, and I saw a really cool one at the, the Esplanade. They have a 3-level. They've got tall human, short to medium human, and like dog level of water fountain. And I think that's really cool.
Try
So,
and sit on the grass.
what's that?
I said, try and sit on the grass, you get arrested.
Well, and I've tested that many times. Like I do it, you know, and I've also slept on the beach, but it's like,
I'm not talking about the beach, I'm talking about the Esplanade.
oh yeah, well, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, there is.
Don't ride your bicycle too
Really?
fast.
Well, and that's a whole nother subject.
serious.
But, and then another thing, I've been involved in an ongoing effort to showcase the beauties of the beachside wildflowers, which also many grow on the mainland as well. So some things that used to only be called weeds, like some people are starting to recognize that they're wildflowers. And one of my favorite places to walk is Puffy Alley near Amy's house. Puffy Alley. Let's see what else. It's
It's South Noble Street, south of the church, the big white Methodist church. You walk down there, we've got it all lined with beach grass and gaillardias and the
gorgeous flowers and tall coastal grasses.
more and more every year.
It's so pretty. Thank you, thank you. And let's see what else. Okay, so when I first moved to Daytona Beach, I had the urban girls honing in instinct for the bones of a walkable town. I'm like, all right, this is a walkable village. And it still kind of is, but you have to be be more athletic than you used to be. Because like the bicycle shop now, the bicycle shop's gone, 3 laundromats have disappeared, like different stuff. Our Walgreens doesn't have a pharmacy anymore. And this isn't something that like the government can control or people can control, but we can kind of get an intention like to attract more of the old walkability back. And we can also get an intention to attract the kind of people to move here who maybe don't want to be car dependent. Like, it's not that there's anything wrong with cars, but you have to admit, a lot of our energy has to get focused on cars and parking. Those things take up a lot of space. So if we get a lot of people who are interested in being less car dependent, leaving their cars at home, or maybe not needing a car, that could be very beneficial for all of us.
Need a little trolley.
Trolley.
Forget to mention the trolley.
Yeah, we need the trolley. Anne Ruby isn't here, but the trolley concept is really
agree.
catching on, you know. And of course, there is also my idea of the having a bunch of canals instead of streets and having a pirate boat via like a shuttle bus. You know, I mean,
Pirate's the key word there.
pirate. Well, Daytona Beach has a pirate history. We had sugarcane, rum runners, you know. Anyway, thank you all. Have a nice evening. I
Thank
need
you,
to
Jen.
come
Thank
to your
you.
shop, Helen. Yes,
And you're not going to be able to answer it, but
try me.
I have fallen on the broken sidewalk that is my side parking lot. The city's, okay, across the street, the city has paved more than a block. Across the street from me at the bar, they have done as length this far.
Hmm.
And when I was on the other board, they gave me the number of who to call. I called, they said they'd come take care of it. It has been, I've now had 2 customers that have tripped. They didn't fall,
Ugh.
they tripped, but I fell into,
Ow. Oh,
It's a sidewalk?
yeah,
there
Did
are.
you call Public
you know,
Works?
yes.
Okay, that's crazy, yeah.
I also told them about
What does she
down by
have to
the graveyard where they had a whole hunk of cement right in the middle, and I saw the man who was blind and walks with his dog trip, and the dog stopped and wasn't quite sure how he was gonna. None of the other corners had it. I kept after the city, they finally took it out, but I also told them about mine. They have yet to come
No, that's a real problem because we're talking about walkability and it's good for the environment and stuff. There are different types of sidewalks and different types of pavement. Maybe some of them I just made up in my own head, but like flexible ones that don't crack and don't get, you know, these differences. Like I took a massive spill one night after a festive evening at Rossellini's. Like I ended up airborne and then smack, but you know. But maybe that wasn't entirely the sidewalk's fault, but it did have, no, the sidewalk thing was tall. It was tall. That thing was, you know, on Harvey, in front of the apartment building. Remember there used to be like a sidewalk thing that was this tall? And it got like, but anyway, no, that's real.
Public Works pretty responsible. I'm surprised.
They have been. Yeah, you should, yeah, I don't know.
just gets me that at the bar, they did theirs, and the city owns the property across from me, and they did, it's about 20 feet of all Bryn, and I didn't notice anything
Yeah.
wrong over there.
Yeah.
You're not squeaking loud enough.
Oh, I see.
Right? I do wonder.
Squeaking.
I hope you get that. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Jenny.
All right. Board comments.
I have a comment. We have a lot of material here, and one thing I have a question on is site-specific zoning district map amendments. And if that's something that we get involved in, it's on page 5 of 72, if that helps.
Was this stuff that City Manager Fiecher was going to go over with us, or?
Is,
Oh,
That
this-
is just for your knowledge. Do you remember that we were talking about
Right.
what are your powers and duties? So I took my time and I extract from the LDC what are your powers and what the board should do. So whatever is in green here, highlighted in green, that's what you are supposed to either approve or make recommendation or a decision, okay?
Right.
So, but it's for your, you will have to. on
My
your spare
question
time.
was, are we allowed to make recommendations?
Yes, you are. You are allowed to do recommendation on general zoning district map amendment, on site-specific zoning district map amendment,
right?
Historic Overlay Zoning District Map Amendment, Plan Development, a Special Use Permit.
If we have a, like, let's say we have a pet piece of land or a project that we like to be redeveloped, could we get involved in that, or it has to be the owner of the property?
It has to be the owner of the property.
Yeah.
Right.
Own it.
And if it's the city that owns it, then it's just a vacant lot? Is it something that we only get involved in if it's sold and then the owner wants to do something with it to get the permits? I'm just confused with that. The only thing I realize is that it needs to be approved by the redevelopment board and the historic committee board on site-specific district maps amendments.
Okay, hold on a second, let me see here.
So map amendments actually are approved by the city commission. Depending on the location is whether or not either the Historic Preservation Board or this board or both are involved. An example would probably be Seabreeze, where it would be both historic and this board. Trying to think of something that would just be historic and not here.
Specifically, I'm thinking the boardwalk, lots by the boardwalk there,
Right.
and any other lots that are within our district.
So the zoning, it is usually changed by the property owner.
Correct.
And when it comes, what you see a lot of with this city is the planned development zoning change, which is where the owner of the property comes in and does specific changes to the zoning. Generally, on a broader scale, you have zoning that you have property that's residential that allows X number of units per acre. You have commercial that allows industrial, commercial that just allows small mom and pop buildings. Those are generally not done lot by lot. Those are more broad scale zoning districts. It's the planned development that is more individual. So with regard to property that the city owns, unless there is a specific plan for it, that it doesn't meet the current zoning requirements, the likelihood of a change to the zoning would probably be unlikely. If we sold it and the new owner wanted to do something more specific, that's when they would apply for
Zoning change.
a zoning change, which is usually in a planned development zoning.
And then according to the steps here, it needs to be discussed by at least redevelopment board and the historic thing. I don't know if it needs to be approved or whatever. They look for a recommendation from each board, from what I could tell.
Right.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, number one, we finally have some good stuff here. This is great. So that's one reason. The second reason is I have a pet project that may come to fruition sometime in the future, and it's that empty lot on the boardwalk that used to have amusements and stuff there, and now it's bigger because they've knocked down the old building there that had the skee ball stuff.
Joyland.
And I'm not sure if that's owned by the city, if it's gonna be developed with another giant hotel, or
Privately owned. Yeah,
It is.
very,
Anders-
very privately owned.
It's-
And it's valued at millions of dollars.
right, I would assume so. It's in,
It's key.
it's the key spot.
There was a 10-year lawsuit over that
Oh,
piece of property.
oh, there is.
I thought it was long.
Okay.
It's been resolved
It was,
recently.
so-
The only thing I'd like to add is I'd like to thank Angela very much for the redevelopment spreadsheet here, the duties and responsibilities, but I want to make absolutely sure, Angela, that under 1B, other responsibilities and authorities of this board are to carry out
Gary, what page are you on?
any other powers and duties delegated it by the city commission
Say page 1.
in
Page one,
accordance
okay.
with state law. And that is a direct reference to the redevelopment plans, to R3, the E-zone, the Main Street, and the South Atlantic. So if your big chart didn't include that sentence, I think it probably should, because I've had discussions with.
Well, this chart is actually from the Land Development Code. That's
Well-
what this chart is. She didn't create a chart. But I know what you're saying, and so
Yeah.
what we were hoping that with the city manager would be here so that you could express your interest in being more involved, so that it's not just staff that's being put in a position of, again, I've said this previously, that staff is kind of in a awkward position because their boss is the city manager.
Can only do what they're directed.
And it can do what he directs. So when this board makes the recommendations to staff, they take it back to the city manager, but if it's not in his plan, then they have to do what he says. Which is why I've also said that if you have items that you would like to have on your agenda so that you can take a formal action, you need to let staff know so that it can be put on the agenda as a public item, that there's public comment, and people know what it is, so that you can take a vote to make a recommendation to the board, recommend that your chair or another volunteer from the board actually, go to the city commission and ask for, the particular matter to be discussed.
We did that with all three plans, and all three plans were passed unanimously by the city commission. So in my book, and our former city attorney concurred, they're in effect.
I totally agree that the plans are in effect, but just like I have plans for building a fence, my budget doesn't allow for me to build the fence right now for myself. So I've got to decide, do I build the fence or I do?
I agree completely.
So that's what I'm saying, is that that's where we
Yeah.
need to have this board say, this is what's important to the city. We make a recommendation to the city commission that we prioritize this way.
Because the plans are the city's plans. They're
Right.
not our plans.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, okay.
Just one, since Miss Ruby isn't here, she had asked the board, and since I can't speak on either side, whether we would be interested in passing a resolution asking for a change to the LDC so the average setback cannot be used, and urged the board to do so.
I just asked that 15 minutes ago.
So my suggestion is that you ask for that to be included on your agenda for the next meeting, that you adopt a resolution or to do that.
But you just told us that the planning board was doing that.
Well, I'm saying that it's already
Okay.
under the whole issues, the concerns about the plan development. Everybody,
We can pile on.
yeah, you can pile.
We can pile on. So do I need to make a motion that we put that on the next agenda?
Yes.
Please?
Yes.
Please do.
Okay, as worded, as Helen just read.
I'll second it.
She seconded it.
Helen said.
The motion was to make an amendment to the LDC on setbacks.
No,
Oh,
to
A
make
recommendation for an amendment for setbacks.
And it's to have the discussion on the next.
Yes, to have a discussion on our next agenda.
Thank you, Helen.
So, the motion seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. All right. Any other board comments?
So just quickly, so if we're making, for example, Mr. Masson, right? Masson's concern about the boardwalk, if we are going to, say we would make a resolution to request an agenda item to discuss points that we want to recommend to the city, and then we could each bring back some, or how would I word that, so that we begin the process of pointing a finger at the boardwalk and saying, what are we doing here? And move it up the list on Mr. Fiecher's.
it's a piece of
priority.
private property, remember that. It's privately owned. And what can be done to it is a matter of zoning and a matter of what the owner of the property can leverage from the city
And everything's
to improve the
negotiable.
zoning. That's what it is. I don't know whether or not that's
But they negotiate all the time. Like, if there was something important enough to the citizens, you know, Mr. Fietro could work, you know, we could. or
And- Until the private property owner starts
Reaches out, there's nothing.
talking about what they're going to be doing, there's really nothing that the city can do at this time. I mean,
Not even eminent domain.
well,
because-
yeah, it would be very difficult to do eminent domain.
Right.
Okay,
Just in an interim period.
So on,
there's really no procedure.
right, but on that point, if a lot that's privately owned has been used, let's say, for amusement areas since Daytona started, and the developer wants to put up a 30-story condo, we don't get involved in it until he has a presentation about his 30-story condo, correct?
Correct.
So there's nothing we could do proactively.
No, because it's private property.
Okay,
Private property, yeah.
that was my basic question.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when it comes to private property, until
In the meantime.
they decide what they're going to do and bring it forward to the city. Now, you can get involved before it comes here as the neighborhood meetings.
Right.
As a
and-
citizen.
As a citizen.
Right. Ken, I was going to ask Mr. Fietro when he came, but do we know anything about the bids that have been put on the Corbin building?
We received one proposal.
One?
It's not made public yet. It was a company that has a brewery in West Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
It's pretty good.
Okay. That was going to be my question, one of my main questions for him. I'm
So-
interested to
so-
know. It's a big piece of property
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
own now.
I can check my calendar to see when the selection committee is meeting, although there's not a whole lot of selection because it was just the one.
Right, just one. That's closed now, correct? for
Yes, it
bidding?
closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it closed.
And I guess we're not getting a pro forma on the Corbin building. We've asked for it now for 4 months. Just what it cost, why we bought it, what the plans are for the future. I think I know what the plans are for the future. I think one of the only concerns I have is that there is no real necessity that this board should be in the dark about the finances in the redevelopment area and the trust fund. We always were right on the front end of the burner when it came to finding commitments out of the trust fund that we felt implemented the plans expressed in those 3 master plans, mainly the Main Street plan. And I understand that the new land development code is not as inviting to the advisory board to do that as previously. But I think the staff needs to remember that there's an entire list of previously passed rules by the city commission at that time that puts us a little closer in that at least review capacity. I mean, we should be budget building as a team for next year right now. And I haven't heard anything about budget building since I've been on the board in 2 years. When I was on economic development, we were involved with the staff in looking at the rising years a budget for economic development efforts in the city. That's how we got tax abatement in the city. And that's how we got a minority hiring policy in the city. That's how we got a lot of things done in the city. It didn't come from the staff, it came from members of the advisory board. So I would feel a lot better if we just, I mean, I feel like I'm working for a company and I don't know what I'm being paid. I don't know what the budget is. I don't know what we make. I don't know what hours we're open. It's a very puzzling situation for us to be in. And I think, Ken, I think you felt it right from the very beginning. And I think there is enough precedent. I'd like to go to the city commission and ask the city commission how much they'd like us to weigh in as in advice, because they haven't gotten one word of advice from us since I've been on this board. And we have a lot of advice we would like to share with the city once we share it among ourselves and a motion is raised and it's passed and we can all get behind it. It's not a criticism. I think it's just, it's a fact, I think. And I understand I understand that there is nothing in the current new job descriptions of staff on redevelopment that says anything about the advisory board. And to me, that's a problem. I think the land development code is a problem. I think the height thing is a result of the land development code, and many of the other squeezes we're going to get in the next couple of years are because the land development code was a very strong manager, land development code, and we have charter government. And our manager is hired by our city commission, who's elected by the people. And I don't think we should ever lose sight of that fact. And I support you guys 100%, and I am impressed with the work we've been able to do. I just don't think, I think I'm in a position where we should know about it, not have to read about it in the newspaper. That's all.
The selection committee.
Forgive me.
The selection committee meeting for the Corbin building is Thursday. Right now, it's set for Thursday, August 17th at 1 p.m. And they're usually held in the City Hall Conference Room 149.
Did you hear that, Gary?
Did you hear that?
What she just said? Oh, okay.
Room 129.
Thank you.
49, the big room downstairs.
City Commission. I got you. All right.
But I certainly would like to know what position we're in before we negotiate. And I personally, I don't know
Negotiate.
much about why we bought the Corbin building, what we paid for it. I don't know anything about Mr. Anderson's share in it and Mrs. Doan. I know nothing about it, and I should. We should.
Should we make a motion to put it on the agenda for next week?
We've already
next
passed.
month.
There's a lot of public record because it went before the city commission and there was all, there is a lot of public record out there already that could be searched. I mean, maybe Mr. Levine.
There's not a lot of public
No?
record out there.
Oh.
It was, the decision was made not very quickly.
It's a private
and with
sale.
no public hearings.
Well,
We didn't have it. We weren't even apprised. I mean, I knew that Teresa was interested, and George Anderson
Yeah,
was
this is
still
before I
alive,
came
that was
here.
interested in selling the building, but that's all we knew. We knew nothing about anything. I thought it was a good
Well,
idea.
I thought there
that
weren't there public
that the
meetings about
redevelopment
it?
board get involved in.
The business development director, Michael Stallworth, I believe, did a presentation to the city commission. I don't recall if it was like a workshop meeting type of presentation or if it was.
Yeah.
It was.
So,
So that,
and then,
It happened while we were having a meeting here.
oh, it might
and I,
have been.
But why we couldn't get the minutes from it, or what, why
We can, it's probably.
why the door should be closed on this board about basic information that is beachside redevelopment. I mean, money's coming out of the trust fund,
You can find a lot on the website. I mean, I haven't
but we shouldn't
specifically.
have to.
Oh, well, I do all the time though, when I want to know something, so I'm ready, but,
It,
um,
it's not on the same subject, but it hit me. George Anderson, we had a big loss. He was a pretty nice man. At least he was nice to me a couple of times. I met him, but over there on the boardwalk, I had dealt with a lot of developers because I have a piece of property that I've been dealing with developers coming into, and they were mentioning about plans they had for the boardwalk. So there is developers reaching out to the owners that I know of, but God only knows what's going to come from it.
They don't know the height limit, they don't know the setbacks, they don't know the zoning.
The only-
It's very tough to do business
the-
against cities who know all of those things.
The only thing I can tell you is that what's the problem is not necessarily that, is the cost of building stuff now. When you go to Lowe's just to get a 2x4, it's 10 times what it was pre-COVID. So that's the one thing it's not necessarily the city right now with what's going on with the development of height as much. It's going to be the cost of the building things. Is I'm looking to try to do a development in Daytona now, and what's hitting me is the cost of the simple concrete, the steel, the appliances and things of that nature. That's going to be something that's a hurdle that's really going to keep people from really doing any building. So it's a slippery slope, in my opinion.
Does that mean we're never going to get the kiosk on the end of Main Street?
I don't know about that.
That's
another question.
sore spot, yeah.
People say, I had no idea you were down here.
Yeah, what happened to that? We passed it as a board. What happened?
Yes.
To the,
We're still waiting for price. We have a meeting this Friday with a company. Once we get all the details, I'm going to include it in your agenda packet so you can review. But right now, I don't have any price. I don't have any details. I'm just searching.
Thank you, Angela.
Okay.
Any other board comments? No? All right. Meeting adjourned.